Welcome back. Here we are, Chapter 14, America and World War II. I have to kind of start the video off on a little bit of a somber note. Over the weekend, someone actually stole my mood ring, and not sure how I feel about that. All right, well, back at it, laugh it off. Here we get to Chapter 14, America and World War II. Section 1, we're going to be talking about mobilizing for war. So, first slide that we're going to have is going to be called the Neutrality Act of 1939. Now, I know in Chapter 13 we talked about a few other neutrality acts, and this is going to be fairly similar to the Neutrality Act of 1935 and the Neutrality Act of 1937. The one little difference at this time is that now World War II has officially started. So, in the last chapter, we talked about Hitler building up aggression. We talked about him taking over the German government, and now World War II is officially going to be underway. Now, the question remains, what is the United States going to do in 1939? As it states on top, the U.S., we are going to remain neutral. This is going to be FDR's stance, saying that we are going to stay out of the war. However, I mean, to take a second and actually think about whether or not we are actually acting in a neutral sense. So when war does break out, just like with World War I and really any other war that we've talked about, all of our allies want us to help them out. They all want assistance from the United States. So once this war starts, our allies, more importantly, Great Britain and France, they come to the United States and they ask for help. Now, just like with World War I, this is a great example. We have a melting pot of a population. Therefore, we have people from all countries who are going to be asking for us to assist them, and a lot of people's nationalities and ethnicities are going to be from a country. So FDR responds by saying, we are going to remain neutral. We are not going to actually pick a side. But as I just said, we're really not going to be acting in a neutral sense because, as the second bullet point states, the new law is going to allow for warring nations. So this is Great Britain, this is France, possibly Germany, although they did not really ask for assistance during this time. They are going to, all these warring nations are going to be allowed to buy weapons from the U.S. only if they pay cash. So again, this is 1939. We're still in the heart of the Great Depression. So we need money, and we need money badly. So if they give us cash and carry the arms on their own ships, we are going to give them weapons. So that's going to be the first part. And again, just kind of like we were doing in the last chapter with the Lend-Lease Act, we're going to get to the Lend-Lease Act and what we're going to do this time around. As long as they give us cash, we are going to allow them to have weapons, but they must carry it themselves. So we're not going to have a Lusitania situation again where we have Americans on board. The other thing we're going to do, if they don't have the cash, we're going to try to take some land in return. So Congress also authorized the trading of old warships for land in the Caribbean. So again, we get money, we get land, which we're going to turn into military bases. We're going to try to rebuild our country that way. So that's going to be the first part. And I know it's very short-lived where we say that we're going to be neutral, and now we're already going to be picking a side, and we are going to be supporting England. So as it says on the first bullet point, FDR originally proclaims that the U.S. is neutral after the declaration of war, but as things start to pick up, as we get more information about the carnage and the bloodshed of what's going to be going on in World War II, FDR swiftly changes his mind. So what he does, he now is going to pick a side, and we are going to pick England, which, again, isn't really going to be much of a surprise because that's who we helped out in World War I. They are, even though we went to war with them in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, they are still going to be considered one of our strongest and one of our closest allies. All right, so that's going to be kind of how we officially kind of get involved in the war. So first part, neutral, they give us money, we give them weapons. The second part, we are going to lend and we are going to lease these types of things. So what that means is the Lend-Lease Act is going to allow the United States to hand over arms, so weapons, bullets, basically anything that can be used to fire in combat. We're going to hand over arms if it was to a country that is vital to the U.S. And again, why do we pick them? They're our strong ally, but at the same time, we are going to rely on them for trade. They are going to also help boost and stimulate our economy, which it's a strange thing to say and it's a strange thing to talk about because war does so much for our country. If we want to get out of the Depression, really, at this time, even though the New Deal has done a lot to get American workers back on their feet, we need to figure out a way to maximize profit. And it's a sad reality. but unfortunately, they are going to be profiting off of war by handing over weapons. And again, you're going to see it here on the last bullet point. But America, we are going to lend more than $40 billion. And again, this is going to be important because we can take those billions of dollars and we can turn those into public works projects. We can turn those into more government corporations that are going to help stimulate the economy and get the American people back on their feet, right? So we give those $40 billion and we are going to be helping out the Allied war effort. All right, so afterwards, now we're going to be officially in World War II, and we're going to skip talking about Pearl Harbor because we have the assignment that is going to talk more in detail about what takes place in the event of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. But really, it should go without saying, and this has been kind of my theory and the thing that I've been telling you guys all year. As soon as U.S. lives are lost, we are going to get involved in war. Pearl Harbor is going to be no exception. Now, after the event, and FDR has the very famous quote by saying, "It's a day which will live in infamy." He is going to ask Congress for a war declaration and a war authorization, and he is going to be granted it. Now, because we're at war, we have to completely change kind of most New Deal things. Instead of trying to start factories for clothing, now they go to uniforms. If it was going to be something that had any electricity, it was now going to be used for weapons. It was going to be used for arms, turn into bullets and missile or bombs and things like that. So after the incident, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, as it says on there, the U.S. is going to rapidly increase its war production, and that's where I start talking about rerouting what those factories are going to be doing. And really, what the government does at this time is, instead of bidding out projects, which is kind of the normal way that the government does something, say for example, if we want to build, we need 50,000 new warplanes, which is a great example because that's what FDR got right away. He asked for 50,000 new warplanes. Because of that, if you were someone who could build a warplane, he had a set price. If you agreed to do it, they did not wait for a bidding war. And it's a good thing because we get things built faster, we get them built more reliably, but at the same time, the price could be a little bit higher. And the way FDR looks at it is, we're still in the Great Depression. We need to do what we can to help the American soldiers. So anyway, so we start to change our war production. Now, the reason that the U.S. is kind of looked at as this like sleeping giant in the war, and the war has been going on for about 2 years before the U.S. gets involved. But once we got to war, statistically speaking, we were much more productive than the Germans and the Japanese. We were much more productive than the people who were going to be considered to be our enemies. And the statistics behind that prove that we were twice as productive as the Germans and 5 times more productive than the Japanese workers, which is going to be really important because during this war, we're going to be fighting on 2 separate fronts. We're going to be sending soldiers overseas to Europe so they can fight against the Germans. And then we're also going to start going on these island hopping campaigns against the Japanese in the Pacific. So we need to be efficient, and that was going to be something that was just really, really helpful for us. All right, so we do that with productivity. By October of 1940, Congress is going to allot the defense budget to $17 billion, which today we are way, way over that. But back then, that was going to be the top budget that we had ever had for our defense. So that just goes to show that the government was willing to get things done and get them done quickly, which kind of goes hand in hand with the last 2 bullet points, that cost plus contracts. I've already talked a little bit about those, but it just goes to show that as long as planes were being built or as long as bullets were being produced, bombs were being produced, if you were able to do it quickly, your company was going to be able to profit, and the government was okay kind of taking that net loss, right? So that's how we're going to be converting the economy. The other things that we're going to do is we're going to have a war production board. And what this is President Roosevelt is going to create the WPB. Just like with the New Deal, he's going to have everything that has kind of a short acronym, and it gives them the priority and the authority to set priorities and production goals. But this really didn't work out because they said we want to have this many bullets, this many, pounds of bandages or whatever it may be. But the military was not following through with the orders. They weren't actually going to be following through and getting the authorization with that. So in total, they create the Office of War Mobilization, which was created to settle arguments between the different agencies and basically just kind of created another middleman to make sure that we were going to be successful. So this is something that you could include with how we were changing the economy or how the military is starting to change. But it's just kind of a little tidbit about what we did to help out. And the last one that we're going to do is talking about building an army. Now, before we actually get to war, Congress kind of has the idea that we are possibly going to eventually get involved in this foreign conflict. And with that, they're going to approve the first ever peacetime draft, which pretty much just set up that if we ever do go to war and we ever do go to a draft, we are going to pick these people first, these people second, these people third, and just make sure that we have enough soldiers who are going to be ready to go right away. So that's going to be the first ever peacetime draft. People were extremely patriotic as well. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, you had more than 60,000 people volunteer to join the military, and those were going to be individuals that were more than likely going to be fighting on the front lines. Now, just like today, whenever somebody is going to be enrolled or enlisted in the military, they are going to be sent to basic training. So soldiers are going to be sent there for 8 weeks, which is going to be shorter than it is today. But back then, you were basically told you need to go learn how to march in formation. You need to go and learn how to fire a weapon. However, that part was kind of a very lackluster effort because they did not have enough weapons for training. Everything got sent overseas. So because of that, soldiers were told that they needed to learn how to hold a weapon. So they were literally just holding sticks. They were driving trucks and they just put the word tank on the side of it. So our training wasn't all that great for basic training at that time, but was something that did start to pick up the more weapons that we had. Talking a little bit more about the military as well. At the start, the U.S. military is going to be very segregated. So that is going to be something that's going to be kind of a tarnish on the military because you had people who were willing to fight, and unfortunately, they were not going to be given the same weapons, the same uniform, the same pay, solely based on the color of their skin. So the U.S. was going to be segregated, and a question I often ask you guys is, is that surprising? And most people say no because that's just the reality of the time, which again is extremely unfortunate. And then I ask, well, would you want to fight? And most people say no. And it's sad because most people would not want to fight. Yet you had people who were willing to fight, but were still treated terribly in segregated headquarters based on the color of their skin. So a lot of the African American leaders are going to launch what's called the Double V campaign, which is achieve victory over Hitler's racism in Germany and then also racism at home. All right, so for those of you who are still listening, this is going to be a little test that I'm going to be doing. One of the last questions I have you guys answer on the chapter plan is to explain the aggression of the war. Do not answer that question. That is a trick. I'm just really going to see who is actually listening and who is not going to be listening, and that they are just going to randomly start writing stuff down without listening or comprehending it, hoping that they will be able to pass the quiz. So again, I repeat, if you are listening, you can stop. You don't have to write any of this down. This is just going to be simply a test. I have blurred out videos before, which again, some people asked me about it, others did not. So, but this is going to be just something else that I'm going to be doing. So do not answer that last question about the aggression during the war. That is just a trick to see who is paying attention. But for those of you who are just writing down without listening, you're still going to see me talking. You're still going to make it seem like I'm going over the notes. I'm just going to start moving my hands so you can start to see that I'm talking about something being that big. But in the end, I pretty much just wrote down a bunch of random things. So anyways, we'll just go through and we'll read those. Yugoslavia was a country. You learn more about that in world geography if you want to take that class later. The Ottoman Empire, they were a country, but they have now since been disbanded. I can't remember the year that happened, but with the start of World War II, something that some people have brought up as being a possible not start of the war, but something that was important. In case you don't know, Utah is a very prominent state in the United States. During World War II, shallots may have been popular. Not really sure. Just something that I thought of while I was creating this on here. Hitler took power when the German government was very weak, which I think most of you know, and was something that we talked about during chapter 13. And then, obviously, it was bad for the entire world. All right, so we're going to keep going here. Now we have German aggression. Again, you do not have to write this down, but if you want to listen to me read, go right ahead. So the U-boats, they were part of Germany's battle strategy more during World War I, and after with the Treaty of Versailles, it was going to be taken away. The German Air Force, they don't go by the name. The German Air Force, they are called the Luftwaffe, in case you were wondering that. During the time of the German invasion, the U.S. was not at war. Okay, Hitler was trying to take over the entire world, and arrows were less common in wartime during the 1900s and beyond. So, just something that is true. Didn't really use that many arrows once we had the modernization of guns and bullets. This is one that is true. VE Day is when we celebrate victory over Europe. We'll talk more about that, but in case you wanted to write that down early, you are more than welcome to. Everfi is due on Tuesday. Something we used to do, but yeah. All right. And World War II continued. So again, if you're listening, you don't have to write any of this down. But if you're just writing stuff down, that's it's going to be on you. So Levi Coffin, just a little bit of a review from our chapter on the Civil War. Levi Coffin is a famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. He was someone who was very wealthy. Istanbul, the largest city in Turkey, actually lies on two different continents. Istanbul is actually two cities. You have Istan and then you have Bol. So yeah, a little bit of a geography quiz for you. Speaking of that, if someone ever asks you what is the largest desert, technically speaking, the largest desert is Antarctica. So make sure you have that ready to go. Soup kitchens, they started to open up more, especially with the Great Depression still going on. All the way back to chapter 1, we have Thomas Jefferson. He's the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. And that should be something that you should remember because that's going to be something that could possibly be on your civics test. Endgame, win the war. Pretty similar, Napoleon, he's from France. He had a lot to do with the starting of World War II. Probably not, but hey, I wanted to throw a World War II fact on there. My middle name is Eric. I thought that could be something that people might like to know. It's spelled with a K because that's how my mom wanted my name to be spelled. And yeah, don't have much else to say. All right, well, if you listened, awesome. You did not have to write down a bunch of stuff. If you did not listen, you just wrote down an acrostic where it says, if you start here, you should have listened. All right, that's the end of video 1. Can't wait for video 2.